Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. Welcome back again. Let's continue the task 1 analysis on dynamic graph. Task 1 essay, which is graph analysis with dynamic graph. Okay, so we've done the introduction. So now let's look at the body part of the essay. The body contains most of the analysis in detail. Right? So for dynamic graph, what you would do basically is to describe the movement of the graph, since it has a lot of trends. Now, in describing the movement, you can describe them using verb or noun. Okay, we've also learned about a verb phrase or a noun phrase. You might want to look back at your workbook to find out notes on all this. Okay, also you will need to include adjective or adverbs to describe the movement, like the word slowly or gradually. Okay, you will also include preposition to add in to the description of the movement. Okay. If you remember carefully, or if I remember right, the preposition note can be found for Teacher C's material on week 3. Okay, so this is, look back at the note that I gave you, the link that I gave you on Google Classroom, which is this one, and then find week 3, okay, and then you will find a note on preposition of at, from, by, and also of. Okay, and then from slide. Okay, so again, in the body part of the paragraph, you are also required to make comparison between different subjects. Okay, let me erase that because this is redundant. Right, and then you can also describe all the data in terms of its time and measurement. We've learned how to describe the exact figure using approximation, fractions, and proportions. You can find that all in the workbook. Okay, so let's look at an example of the body part of the essay from our previous session. Okay, so just to remind you what this graph is about. This is a graph about the unemployment rates in US and Japan. So just remember how the graph looks like. In US it goes down, in Japan it goes up. So what happens in the body paragraph? Okay. So at the beginning here, we can see at the beginning of the period, the unemployment rate in the US was much higher at 7% as compared to only 2.5% in Japan. So from the very beginning, it compares between US and Japan in the beginning of the period. And then it continues between March 1993 until March 1997. Okay, the figure fell markedly at 5%. Right, so this is for US. Okay, approximately 5% here. And then despite some minor fluctuation, the figure remain relatively stable for the next few years. So there's some fluctuation, but it is stable. Okay, and then we have here, so the first part mostly talks about what happens to US. So the second part here talks about mostly what happens to Japan. So this is one way of organizing your essay. You can talk about the subjects, okay, for in this case, the Americans and the Japanese. Or you can talk about the period starting from 1983 until 1999. Okay, so you can see a lot of words which describe movements, like for example, fell markedly. So we have here a verb and an adverb. So this is what you call a verb phrase. And then you have here remain relatively stable, again a verb and an adverb. Grew is just a verb. Okay, and then before rising, so here we have a preposition, so after preposition you need to have a noun. We have a noun here, some minor fluctuations. We have an adjective and a noun, so everything can be found here. Okay. Alright, so lastly, after you're done with the body, you can write the conclusion. So what are needed in the conclusion? You need to start off your conclusion with a concluding remark. Okay, we've covered this before. Example of a concluding remark includes in conclusion, to conclude, and so on and so forth. Okay, so the main thing that you need to have in the conclusion is to summarize the analysis. Now, some teachers would just ask you to restate the overview or to rephrase the overview to be exact. Right? To write the same thing but to be rephrased in a different sentence. Okay, so what is actually needed is a summary of the whole analysis. So let's look at an example. Okay, we have a concluding remark here which says, in conclusion, okay, it says, although at the beginning the unemployment rates in the US and Japan were significantly different from one another, towards the end of the period, both rates intersected and were relatively similar. Okay, so it's not the same with what was written in the introduction. Okay, it's different, but it summarized the whole graph. Okay, if you remember the graph, okay, so at the beginning they are different, but towards the end they intersected. Okay, they cross line with each other, and they were relatively similar. They're not exactly similar, but they were relatively similar. Okay, this is a good summary of the whole essay. Okay, if you are unable to do this, maybe you can just rephrase the overview here. Alright, but if you do that, maybe you might not get that high of a band. It's not wrong, but this method here gives you a better band score. Okay, I guess that's all for the dynamic graph. We'll see again with the static graph. Thank you very much.